There was a time when the heart of every home wasn't glowing from a screen, but from an oven, when recipes weren't just instructions. They were family heirlooms, passed down by hands that measured not with spoons, but with love. In Grandma's kitchen, nothing went to waste. Every dish had a story, every smell had a memory, and every bite carried the taste of simpler times. But many of those recipes have quietly disappeared. Today, we're opening the old recipe box once more to remember 5 lost dishes from Grandma's kitchen, the meals that fed generations but somehow slipped away with time. This is the America we remember. Before Jell-O meant neon desserts and birthday parties, it was a dinner table staple, shimmering, savory, and surprisingly serious. This was Grandma's tomato aspic, a jiggly salad that once stood proudly beside the Sunday roast. Tomato aspic first appeared in American kitchens in the early 1900s, but it found its true fame during the Great Depression and World War II. It was a clever, resourceful dish, a molded salad made from tomato juice, gelatin, vinegar, and spices, sometimes filled with vegetables or hard-boiled eggs. In an age before refrigeration was widespread, it was a dish that could stay firm, keep well, and feel fancy without costing much. By the 1950s, cookbooks were filled with aspic variations, shrimp aspic, chicken aspic, even cottage cheese aspic, all gleaming proudly from cut glass molds at bridge luncheons and church picnics. It was a symbol of sophistication and thrift, a dish that told guests, we may not have much, but we can still make it elegant. In Grandma's day, tomato aspic represented the perfect blend of practicality and pride. It used cheap, shelf-stable ingredients, yet could look like something straight from a magazine. For many women in post-war America, serving aspic was a small act of creativity and dignity, a way to bring color and shape to a meal made mostly from rations or leftovers. It wasn't just food, it was presentation, a reflection of the care put into every meal. But as time passed, taste changed. The once loved salad that wiggled became a punchline. Younger generations found its rubbery texture odd and its flavor strange. Cold tomato jelly just didn't have the same charm anymore. By the 1980s, tomato aspic quietly vanished from dinner tables, its molds tucked away in dusty cupboards. Still, for those who remember, one spoonful brings back the laughter of family picnics, the hum of ceiling fans, and the gentle pride in serving something beautiful, even when times were hard. And while tomato aspic shimmered in crystal bowls, another forgotten dish warmed the heart, a sweet and thrifty dessert that made the most of what little families had, bread pudding. In a time when nothing could be wasted, even a hardened loaf of bread had one last chance to bring warmth to the table. This is a story of bread pudding, the dessert that turned scarcity into sweetness. Bread pudding dates back centuries, but became a true American classic during the Great Depression and wartime years. Families learned to stretch every ingredient, and stale bread, once destined for bin, became the star of the show. Grandmothers soaked old bread in a simple mixture of milk, eggs, sugar, and a pinch of spice. If the pantry was kind, maybe a handful of raisins or a drizzle of molasses joined in. The result was baked until golden and soft inside, humble but comforting beyond measure. In the South, it was often served with a warm whiskey or vanilla sauce. In the North, perhaps a dollop of butter or a sprinkle of nutmeg. No two recipes were the same, but every one carried a story of frugality, creativity, and a love for feeding a family no matter what. Bread pudding mattered because it represented resourcefulness with heart. It reminded people that good food didn't require wealth, only care. Families gathered around this sweet, dense pudding not because it was fancy, but because it was familiar. In church basements, boarding houses, and small-town diners, bread pudding was a taste of home. It filled bellies and lifted spirits. It was Grandma's quiet way of saying, we'll make do and we'll make it delicious. Over time, as convenience foods replaced home cooking, bread pudding faded into nostalgia. But every so often, when it reappears on a diner menu or at a Sunday brunch, one spoonful brings back something that's been missing. That feeling of home, of comfort, of simpler times when dessert wasn't about indulgence, it was about love. And while bread pudding sweetened hard times, another dish was pure ingenuity. One that turned leftover potatoes into a filling meal that stretched across days. Potato pancakes. When money was scarce and bellies were empty, the humble potato became a hero. And with just a grater, a bit of oil, and a hot pan, Grandma could turn scraps into something that fed the whole family. Potato pancakes, or tater cakes as some called them, were born out of necessity and passed down through generations of resourceful cooks. During the Great Depression, the war years, potatoes were one of the few foods people could count on. Cheap, filling, and versatile. Grandmothers grated leftover boiled potatoes or raw spuds, mixed them with a bit of flour, onion, and maybe an egg if they were lucky. Then they fried them until crisp and golden on the outside, soft and steamy within. The sizzling sound in that old cast-iron skillet was a soundtrack of survival and comfort. In immigrant families from Germany, Poland, and Ireland, the tradition of potato pancakes carried the taste of home across the ocean. It was a simple food, yes, but it held cultural pride, a bridge between old roots and a new life in America. Potato pancakes were proof that good food didn't need luxury. They stretched a single potato into something that could feed many, a lesson in frugality and love. Often served with applesauce or sour cream when available, they filled homes with warmth and a savory scent that made everyone forget the cold outside. They were quick to make, satisfying, and adaptable, the kind of dish that made families gather, laugh, and feel okay again, even if just for a moment. Today, potato pancakes are considered a comfort food, often found at diners or festive markets. But back then, they were survival food, crafted from hardship. What we now see as a nostalgic treat once represented ingenuity in the face of hunger. And as the frying pan cooled, Grandma would often smile and say, "See, you don't need much, just enough." But not every dish from Grandma's kitchen was savory. Some recipes were pure invention, like the sweet, creamy dessert that made family forget the sugar rations for a while. Milk toast. When the world fell uncertain and the cupboards were bare, Grandma had one secret weapon for comfort: warm milk poured over toasted bread. It sounds simple, almost too simple, but for millions of Americans, it was a taste of peace in a time of struggle. Historical background/context. Milk toast was once a breakfast staple across Depression-era America, a dish born from scarcity, yet rich in comfort. Bread and milk were two of the most basic ingredients in any home. Even when everything else ran out, families would toast slices of stale bread, then soak them in hot milk mixed with a touch of butter, sugar, or cinnamon when available. It was warm, filling, and gentle, especially for children, the elderly, or anyone too weak for a heavier meal. In many homes, this wasn't just breakfast, it was medicine. Doctors even recommended milk toast for digestion issues or recovery from illness. It wasn't glamorous, but it represented care, nurturing, and survival in its softest form. Why it mattered or was popular. Milk toast wasn't just food, it was emotional nourishment. During the Great Depression and wartime rationing, when butter and sugar were luxuries, this humble dish reminded people that love could turn the simplest ingredients into something meaningful. Mothers and grandmothers across the country prepared it for their families. A small act of warmth during cold mornings or after long, anxious nights. Even after times improved, some kept the tradition alive, not out of need but nostalgia. A reminder of resilience and home, emotional or shocking twist. Today, milk toast has nearly vanished from modern tables, replaced by cereals and fast breakfasts. But for those who grew up with it, the memory lingers. It's not the taste they remember most, it's the feeling, the sound of the spoon stirring, the steam rising from bowl, the quiet hum of safety in a world that had none. It was more than food, it was reassurance in a spoon. And while milk toast brought quiet comfort, some recipes from Grandma's kitchen were born from pure creativity, like turning stale cornmeal and water into something you'd swear was a feast. Next up, cornmeal mush, the poor man's breakfast that built a nation. It bubbled in cast iron pots long before the Great Depression, a golden, humble mixture of cornmeal and water. It was called mush, but to millions of struggling Americans, it was survival, and in its simplicity, it carried the spirit of endurance itself. Cornmeal mush dates back to early colonial America, rooted in both Native American and pioneer traditions. By the time the Great Depression hit, it had already been a part of the American table for generations. But now, it became a lifeline. Made from nothing more than cornmeal, water, and salt, It could be stretched to feed large families on pennies a day. Cooked slowly until thick, it was served hot like porridge for breakfast or left to cool in pans, sliced and fried in the evening. Some added a drizzle of syrup or a pat of butter when they could afford it. But most of the time, it was plain, hearty, and filling. During the darkest economic years, cornmeal mush wasn't just food, it was ingenuity. It reflected how Americans could turn scarcity into sustenance and poverty into perseverance. Cornmeal mush was the great equalizer, eaten by rural farmers and city families alike. It kept bellies full, stretched meager pantries, and became a symbol of thrift and practicality. In many ways, it represented the resilience that defined Depression-era America. It was easy to make, stored well, and wasted nothing. In times when flour and meat were rationed, cornmeal was cheap and abundant, making mush not only a necessity but a national staple. Today, cornmeal mush is rarely seen outside old cookbooks or rural diners. But for those who lived through the Great Depression, its taste isn't forgotten. One spoonful could bring back memories of sitting by the stove, the smell of corn and smoke filling the kitchen. A reminder that even in the hardest times, people found warmth, dignity, and hope. It wasn't fine dining. It was survival with a heartbeat. From tomato pudding to milk toast, every forgotten Depression dish tells a story. Not just a hunger, but a heart. And together, they remind us that the measure of a nation isn't found in its wealth, but in how it endures when there's none left. As we close the worn pages of Grandma's recipe book, one truth becomes clear. Food was never just about feeding the body. It was about feeding the spirit. From stale bread turned into milk toast to humble cornmeal boiled into mush, every Depression-era dish told the same story. That love, ingenuity, and hope could make even the smallest meal feel like a feast. These weren't just recipes. They were acts of survival, written in flour, salt, and sacrifice. They carried families through the darkest years of America's history. And somehow, they carried its heart, too. Today, in our age of convenience and waste, maybe it's worth remembering what our grandparents knew, that the simplest food often holds the deepest meaning. Because when we remember these forgotten meals, we're not just tasting history. We're honoring the people who endured it. This has been the America we remember. If this story stirred a memory, a smile, or maybe even a tear, consider subscribing so we can keep preserving the recipes, the culture, and the spirit that built this nation one humble meal at a time. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep remembering.